Hi there, it's Elizabeth Ritchie. It's April 8th. I am doing this video on behalf of Ramban and Ritchie Immigration Attorneys. Today I will be talking about the Visa Bulletin and hopefully making a little bit of sense out of that for you. When you hear on the news about people need to, quote, get in line, the Visa Bulletin is the line. So I'm going to explain to you how it works and how you can see the bulletin yourself and follow along. The Visa Bulletin is physically published in about the middle of every month on the Department of State's webpage. It's the same page where you get travel information and passport forms. It's travel.state.gov. So on travel.state.gov, you'll look for Visa Bulletin, and you will click on the bulletin for the current month or the next month. So for example, today is the 8th of April. The May Bulletin is not yet out. It should be out in about a week. So for the April Bulletin, it tells you who can get the green card at what point. So in the family context, F, that's the first chart on the top. F, you can see the dates, and they're for all chargeability: Mexico, Philippines, India, China, and to see El Salvador, but that's a different chart. So for family, it's all chargeability, which is everyone not in the other countries: China, India, Mexico, and the Philippines. And then we have categories within that. For example, F2A, F2B, F3, F4. So F2A is for spouses and children. So that's spouses of US citizens and children of residents. F2B is adult children of residents and spouses of residents. F3, married children of citizens, and F4 is siblings. So the reason that's important is if you're being sponsored by a permanent resident, you need to make sure that the Visa Bulletin is current and that you are in status to be able to file under F2B. F4, for example, is very backlogged. It's traditionally been backlogged many, many years. For example, for F4, for all chargeability, we're currently adjudicating cases in immigration from 2007. But for the Philippines, January 2001, Mexico, January 99, India, August 05, China, July 07. In other words, if you're being sponsored by your US citizen sibling and you're Filipino, you're waiting almost 20 years in line. And if you're not in the US, you can't come here, for example, as a tourist in the meantime, because you've already demonstrated immigrant intent. Or if you're in the US, maybe you filed under 245I of the Life Act, you can't do anything until your date is current. Can't get a driver license in most states, cannot work. There's an exception with the V visa, so it depends on when you filed the I-130 through your relative. And you certainly can't leave, because if you leave, you're not coming back for 10 years or more. So that's the line in the family context. I do want to point out that if a permanent resident sponsors an adult child and that child marries, that child gets kicked out of the category and has to start all over again with the new I-130 and is not able to preserve that priority date. Let's talk about the second chart on travel.state.gov in the Visa Bulletin, which is for employment. So that's the EB cases. That means employment base. EB1, I talked about briefly yesterday. That's for extraordinary aliens who meet 3 of 6 factors. They can sponsor themselves. They don't need a company or an employer to sponsor them. EB2 has a few possibilities within it. If you have an advanced degree, you can sponsor yourself. You can also be sponsored by an employer in that category as EB3 and EB4. EB3 is for those skilled workers and professionals and, quote, other workers. EB4 is religious workers, and EB5 is those investor visas where you're investing, you know, 900,000 or more. That's the new amount that just changed last year. And there's something called regional centers or you can make an investment anywhere if it's not a regional center or an area with unemployment 125% or more above the national average. So for China and India in EB2, it's very backlogged. It's still backlogged in EB1, but it's at least better and a little bit faster than EB2. Otherwise, for EB2, which is what I concentrate mostly on, that national interest waiver, the self-sponsored green cards, those are mostly current, again, except for China and India. So if someone is abroad and they want to do an EB2, they can only file the I-140. Then if the I-140 is approved, the case will get sent to the National Visa Center for online processing, and then the case will be sent to the U.S. consulate with jurisdiction over the person abroad, where they will go for an interview. They will do a security check, fingerprints, and a medical exam to make sure there's no communicable disease or likelihood of becoming a public charge in the future. Then we have the people who are already here legally who'd like to file. They can do the I-140 simultaneously with Form I-485, which gives status irrespective of a visa. It gives work authorization and travel, and it allows for a spouse and children under 21 to file as well. You can file, like I said, simultaneously, or you can wait to get a decision on that I-140 before filing the I-485. The legal standard changed in late 2016 for the self-sponsored cases, and that was a case called Donosar. Under Donosar, you need to prove you have an advanced degree, which is a master's or above, that your work has substantial merit and national importance, that you're well positioned to continue your work, and that the labor certification should be waived. If you can prove those and you are in lawful status in the US, then you can go ahead and simultaneously file the I-485. Otherwise, you do the I-140 by itself if you're abroad, and then you go through that consular processing that I mentioned. It is a great way to get a green card without being obligated to an employer. It is a high legal standard, but if you have an advanced degree, your work likely does have substantial merit and is in the national interest. You've probably spent many years on your education and doing professional activities, joining associations, giving speeches, things like that, so you may qualify. You can go to uscis.gov and in the search box, enter EB2, and you'll scroll down and you'll see the different types of EB2s that are available. But the point of today's video is to explain that the line that you hear on the news is quite long. It can be 20 years, it can even be more, especially if the applicant marries in the meantime. So there are a lot of nuances to take into consideration for the Visa Bulletin, especially, for example, if a child turns 21 during the process. It's called age out, and then you need to start all over again and get bumped to a slower category. So I encourage you to go to travel.state.gov and look at the bulletin and be aware that it does change, and it can go backwards in the future. So it doesn't move in real time. It can become unavailable or go current. So if this bulletin applies to your case, you need to know where it is at the point in time that you're filing. It's a little bit complicated, but as I tell all my clients, if you know that it's complicated and confusing at the beginning, hopefully it's a little bit less complicated and a little less confusing. Thank you.